Hey everyone, how's it going tonight? It's been a while since I've been in here. We are in Studio B of Like-Minded Creators, aka the project studio setup for the analog gear that we see in here that's eventually going to go to its new home. But until then, we are taking full advantage of it. I got my main guys, Zaki Ali, Greg Talfay on here. And Zach, we are going to dive into your mind tonight. I don't know how scary this is going to get, but we... Basically, correct me if I'm wrong, you recorded and mixed the Maximus record, the new EP coming out from Maximus. Follow them in the description. Yep. And you had it basically all done, all mixed in your hybrid setup over there, which you guys have seen before. And you decided, you know what? Just like Toyota with the Lexus LFA, let's redo the whole thing all over again. Sorry if you don't understand car references, but you decided to remix it in analog and... explain, as the Daleks would say.
So, okay, just to like start off, we'll go over like the whole mentality behind it in the first place. So, like when we initially tracked the songs, a lot of the writing was done in the studio. You know, Alejandro had prepared a bunch of great material beforehand, and then we would record things, and there'd be little accidents that would happen, and things would change, and whatever, and we would have a final tracked version that I would edit and put together, and that was mixed. Now, we've been playing out now for about a little over a year, and our perspectives on the songs are completely different, right? So just from the performance aspect, playing drums, I am a lot more certain of what I'm doing rather than having played it for the first time in the studio session. So that was first and foremost one difference in like what the outcome would be. So, with that being considered, in the middle of testing this equipment here for a setup, and basically, thing is, before even like going ahead and recommending this for use, it's like you have to start to understand the ins and outs of how, what functions you use certain things for, right? So, whether it's FET compressors or this tube EQ or bus compression. And so, you kind of start to get an idea of that with more and more experience mixing and in different settings and different records and, what works well with this, what works well with that. And over those years, most these units that are here are basically real versions of plugins I would be using in my drum mix chain and for processing guitars, for vocals, for everything, like to do a mix basically. And so, like I've had the chance to work with some of this gear before, but more hardware versions that were made by they were clones. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't the actual unit, it was just like another company that made that. And I did get to experience some great results from it, but then it's always a little different with the actual unit. And so each piece of gear here has its own learning curve. And, you start to see how things react as opposed to like when they react with a plugin. And then you have this one piece of gear reacting different, and then you have a signal chain in line with 2 or 3 other pieces of gear that react completely different. So from A to Z over here at the end, it's just a completely different signal chain, like a result of the signal chain. And the one thing I really, really started to notice was FET compressors. We're talking 1176s. We got 8 of the blueies there. We can run vocals through them. You can run guitars through them. You run drums through them. And, the whole concept of why I was even using the bluey as a plug-in version was it just had this really nice characteristic that would add a little bit of saturation and, could like kind of spice up your guitars or like add a little more snap on that snare, that quick attack. And so, then when you get the actual unit and you try running the same amount of gain reduction on the signal. It amplifies the signal. You get that saturation, but it's the characteristic of the saturation is completely different. And so, you stack 2 guitars on the left, 2 guitars on the right, quad track guitars, and you run 1176 plugin on them, and it might sound good. It sounds really good, but by the time you get to your guitar bus and mix bus and run it through a few other processes, you'll notice that you won't even notice necessarily, because technically you'd be doing everything right, but there's extra noise in there, and noise that just kind of, it takes up space. I guess that's the best way to describe it, right? And so the one thing I really started to notice with processing with this gear was the clarity and how distinct it made every part stand on its own. And, obviously we have some analog mid-side compression and processing going on also with the analog circuit. So that definitely plays into that as well with the SSL Bus Plus. So, with this Maximus record, I was talking to Alejandro. We set everything up, and he was like, "Let's do the EP through it." And I was like, "Okay." We tracked drums in the other room. We did them on all different sessions over the course of, say, a year or so. So why not track a better performance with all of the mics that I would like to have ideally in the mix, with the drum kit tuned and tracked in one session, all nice cymbals, better performance, run it through all the Neve 1073. So, and then run it into Burl for the A to D converters and everything. So you just get a better capture overall. So I think first and foremost, doing that alone just created so much space and clarity in the mix for everything else to sit. And then also previously the drums had 9 mics on them. It was kick, snare top, snare bottom, tom 1, 2, 3, overhead left, overhead right, and room mic, single room mic. And that sounded good. Not that there's anything particularly wrong, but what we added here is 2 more mics for the room XY at the same time as the mono mic on the corner. So we got the U87 with the XY mic, and what I'll do is pan the XY left and right. We're feeding room bus into an API 2500 and getting some really nice smashing reverb characteristics. But the XY room mics kind of creates this other dimension of width in the cymbals for sure. It's a really nice blend with the overhead. So that was one thing. You're getting cleaner capture. You're getting a controlled environment where all the songs are on the same, recorded in one session essentially. The playing is better, it's tighter, more confidence behind the songs. So now that there's more space with the guitars, immediately I noticed there was, on the original recordings, we did a left and right DI. We quad tracked the guitars on the songs. And so we reamped the signal. For 2 of the reamps, we ran the PV Invective, that you guys have seen in previous videos. And then for the other 2 guitars, we ran John's amp, which was a Paul Reed Smith Archon, a really nice tone. And I think it really complemented the PV nicely, right? So we got these reamps, 2 signals PV, 2 signals PRS, and when you have, you send them to a guitar bus in Pro Tools, and typically what I would do, if I was running a digital setup and I didn't have the option, I've shown this in the past too, but I would like to initially start off with a little bit of multiband compression on the low end. And what that does is, instead of just putting a high pass and cutting out all of the low end information entirely, multiband compression just tames it a little bit to sit just right so that your bass is cutting through and like nice and present. And so I noticed, especially with guitars that are more low end dominant, like 8 string, for example, that it was very easy to overdo the multiband compression on the low end because it's a little deceiving, right? Like you would think that, okay, maybe I need less of the low end so this bass could cut through. You're in the same range, same register as bass. And so it's really easy to overdo that and kind of lose a lot of the harmonic content of the guitar. And then you put a fake plug-in on it with saturation to try to make up for it, and you're just adding noise and cluttering up the mix. And, you know, it doesn't seem like you're doing anything wrong, but it's like a very simple gain staging thing, like the plugin you're using, the characteristic of the plugin. And so what was different with running this setup is I was able to omit this multiband compressor from the signal chain on the guitar mix, and we sent it out of the burls. I ran it into the stereo Pultex over here, and rather than doing multiband compression on the low end, we did a little attenuation on, 60, 100. I believe we did 60 on the Maximus record, on the low lows. And these guitars are going into this 8-string range as well. And the result, just from the Pultex, before it even hit the bus compressor, the Bus Plus, it was completely eye-opening. I mean, the difference in the tone, how alive the tone was, and without being harsh and giving the just tightened up low end it needed, but also having enough space for bass and kind of, again, sitting in its own space. The trick was we also ran the Pultex into the Bus Plus, into the mid-side circuit, on mid-side mode, and on the mids, we compressed some of the high frequencies, and on the sides, we compressed the low frequencies, expanded some of the highs. And then you dial in the level between mids and sides and get it really nice and spread out and sounding brilliant, So then you pan the bass center. We had a really nice tone, actually. We were running on parallax. The bass tracks sounded great. That was probably the minimum, like the least treated or least different thing between the mix we did in here and the previous mixes. And so just doing that with the guitars and the drums with the analog processing was, such a game changer for the mix. You could imagine, right? Like two of the main, elements that hold a lot of weight in the mix, right? Then another big thing
for hard rock and metal, like at least.
Right.
Two huge factors.
Drums, bass guitar. The drums, they have a certain sound now. You're sidechaining kick to bass, for example. It reacts differently. It gets like a different feel to it even. So then the other really, really big thing, and especially in the context of Maximus, was vocals. We spent so much time layering all these different just vocal parts. Like, there's 12 vocal parts going on at one point, and harmonies worked out, and triples of this vocal and triples of that vocal and triples of all the scream vocals, and there are so many vocals. And also, like the plug-in version of the 1176 was a great option at the time. A little bit of 1176, a little bit of LA2 classic vocal trick, and doing that on plugins sounds great, but doing that on actual 1176s is a whole different ball game. So just, again, to the point I was making before about the clarity that opened up in the guitars, the clarity that opened up in the vocals was absolutely, it was mind-blowing, so now you have like the chorus of a Maximus song, and it's, you have orchestrations going on, you have drums going on, you have guitars going on, you have 12-part vocal harmonies going on, and you have all these layers. And, with the previous versions, when you're running plugins, it was so easy for things to start masking other elements of the mix. Even if you had your EQ right, everything was set up exactly how it should be, gain stage properly, nothing's clipping, feeding into the master right. And that was not even a completely digital setup. I was running my Neve Shelfords in there, and then another Bus Plus that I have in there, to do some of the mid-side processing that I was doing. But the thing was, I was feeding these plug-in versions of 1176s into the Bus Plus and then processing that. And so it's almost like the bad effect that you're putting into your Bus Plus is almost like being amplified by the Bus Plus in a way. And you could still use it, but the way that it reacts is different. So, these are all like the subtle little things I started noticing as I started working with some of this gear. And another interesting thing was when it came down to gain staging, like we saw in one of the tutorials previously, it's completely different. And so, if you're running a chain, I have a signal chain I'll run for snare bus. And so it goes out into a stereo API 5500. Snare bus would be snare top and bottom mic. So API 5500 EQ, out from that into a API 2500 EQ. Just absolutely love that compressor for snares. And then one thing I had started experimenting with more recently was running a little bit of 1176 after. Just a touch of compression on the snare to give a little bit more of that just crack. And so when I tried initially running into the actual 1176s post API 2500, I was a little confused because I had my gain like all the way down, my threshold down, and I'm looking at the signal on the 1176, and it's slamming, right? It's like clipping. So there's so much more to work with as far as like gain structure when you're working with analog gear, and that's like alone is like part of why it ends up like cleaning up the signal in that way, I guess, or like just having everything sit in its own place so nicely. And that was one thing that like was kind of an eye opener for me personally. I just in turn, instead of sending the signal out at 0, now I ended up sending it to like -12 or so, -12, and ran into the EQ. EQ sounded good. Ran into API 2500, got a healthy signal on there, and then ran into the 1176s and was getting like a nice signal in there. And just a touch of that compression and the way it reacted with the actual signal chain versus the plug-in versions was, it was, again, completely different, but really, really nice and really clean. Basically utilizing the compressors that have quick attack where they need to be in the signal chain versus a bus compressor versus diode bridge compressor. So it's, there's all these different methods you could use the analog gear for. But, if you have a good idea of how you should be using it and, actually using it properly, then I don't think there's really like a way to get a cleaner end result. Like the mixes, I would say, went from kind of like sounding good, but like you couldn't exactly pinpoint what was off or what was muddy or if something was like
you just had like that sixth sense that something
like it's just not quite
it's 100%. Good, but it's not exactly where I want it to be, right?
And so when I did this, it was like all of a sudden I could hear every detail of the chorus without having to try to listen for it. It was happening. It was there, nice and clear, and while doing that, still be pleasing to the ear, which, when you're running distorted guitars and all this harsh everything going on, harmonic content, really getting that separation it's everything. But yes, does it make a difference? Of course, there's a difference. There's certain plugins that'll do it better. There's certain plugins that'll work and function completely differently to achieve the same result. So it's all a matter of like understanding what tools you want to use to achieve your end result, and you know how you're gonna minimize your signal loss and retain the strength of the source signal all the way through till the end, you know. And that's really all it is, signal flow, you know. Mixing.
Zach.
Yeah.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Oh yeah, I forgot. Greg's still here.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Very nerdy.
Yeah.
This is a very nerdy
But
video.
Yeah.
it's really cool. How would somebody like me
Yeah.
get access to use equipment like this, right? That's a good question to answer. And the answer generally would be, know somebody, go to a studio that has this outboard gear for yourself, and get a good deal on it.
Yeah.
Maybe $1,500 I paid to get maybe 6 songs ran through there, and it made
Yeah.
a big difference. And we had,
For sure.
you know,
But there's again, like,
get
there's
somebody
one
to work
really
with
important
that
point.
that knows the equipment. Right?
That 100%. So that was the really important point I mentioned before, is like, there's a lot of nice studios. There's places I've gone and I've seen amazing gear, and you have engineers there that are just working on the box and have no idea how to use the gear.
Right.
And you would pay $1,500 a day just to rent out this room that has all this gear, and maybe figure out how to patch in 1 or 2 things and not know how to use it correctly.
Yeah.
There's a big difference when you go in with a certain kind of intent to do this with this piece of gear. And having that foresight before you go and spend $1,500 is pretty important.
Well, know who you want to work with too, because they got to know that gear. If they live with that and they breathe with that and they're using that, and that's what you're going there for. Know what you're going there for.
That's all like
So
completely
I went
logical.
there to get my stuff ran through this type of gear, and it made the record sound way better. And that's how.
How did it make the
record?
record sound better, in your opinion?
Hold on, let me give you
Yeah.
let me give you the microphone
kinda-
then,
it was
so you
kinda
can
like-
talk clearly.
It was kind of like the glue that held everything together, that wasn't there before, and it made it sound. It like took any
A little
synthetic
less compression.
type of feeling from it, like very digital to
Yeah.
like more organic sounding, like it just sounded bigger,
Nice.
fuller.
Yeah.
So if you know
I mean,
somebody,
sure. I guess that's one way to say it. It's just like, you know, I went into detail about like some very specific processes that we did with the Maximus record. We'll play an example of like a before and after, just to show you.
Yeah, the reason why you guys clicked on this video, let's be real. A lot of you
we
audiophiles
could
are gonna
put one at the beginning of the video, or a little clip at least, to get.
I mean,
get it going.
I think we can all unanimously agree. Like, I did a video recently, and because I'm a Marvel loser nerd, I called it the 6 Infinity Stones of like the perfect recording. Number 1 is always going to be the source, so it's the musician itself that knows how to play, knows the parts, knows every in and out of their instrument. Number 2 of importance is the instrument itself that the musician's playing.
Absolutely.
Is it a good quality instrument? Is it tuned right? Does the musician know how to play? Third, and I think, Zach, you'll agree with me on this because you and I are experienced with this, it's the room of which you're recording in of importance. And then number 4, it's the engineer's ears.
Yeah.
And then it comes to, other things like gear or whatnot. But like in order of importance, like you can, like you said, you literally just said, Greg, you can go to a studio where they have an arsenal of this stuff. But if the engineer has no clue how to use it, then it's useless. You can give the greatest performance you've ever given. If the engineer doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, a guy.
You just want to talk to the person that does this the best.
Like,
And meanwhile, like, I don't want to give, I love giving Zach flowers when he deserves it. But like a guy with ears like Zach in this room, let's be honest, guys, this is not a professionally treated room. The stuff that I've heard this dude right here get in this room using this, or even just the all digital plugins, this dude's ears are above and beyond some of the best ears I've ever like encountered, met, heard, whatever. Like the mixes this dude can get is unbelievable. And Zach deserves his flowers given for this. Because Zach's a talented musician and also an equally talented engineer.
I think
so that just
one
plays
important
importance.
point to make here, though, is it's running the gear. it's like I was saying, like there was a purpose and intent for certain signal chains set up for specific purposes that were happening in the mix. And so one takeaway was that it was a lot easier to just dial in something that worked right off the bat using the analog gear, as opposed to like tweaking the plugin to get this harsh frequency out and this and this. It just kind of like lends itself to happen in a way if you're putting everything right in signal chain, and you know, pretty awesome. But I you know, there's different approaches to everything. It's not like saying one thing's right or one thing's wrong. But to what Greg was saying earlier, like, you know, you go to a studio, like, and you, okay, so what you were saying earlier, you go to a studio, you spend $1,500 a day, and you have an engineer or someone that just watches the room and doesn't know how to run the equipment, doesn't know how to patch this in. And you could be like, no, I want to use this piece of gear no matter what. And you could sit there for 2 hours trying to figure out why it's not working or why it's not giving you the right amount of signal. And there's a learning curve to it and experience needed behind it. So, yes, if you look at this situation from like a third-party perspective, someone that's looking in on it, right? It's like if you're someone just going into a studio not knowing how you want to approach it, what you want to do, you're going in there expecting an engineer, someone else, to have an idea of the sound that you're going for in your head and come up with a routing plan to achieve that accurately. And you're hoping that it's going to be great, but like,
well,
just imagine how many factors
You probably
there
want
are
to,
in
like,
what I
the
just said,
preparation
you know?
needs
Like,
to be, like, there. So, like, before I went, you know, we emailed the guy. We knew who he was. I forget his name, but he was somebody that was actually good, that worked there and knew how to do, you know, use the equipment. And we gave him the songs before we even went there so he can listen to them.
right.
And then we booked time, and we went in there, and we used everything that was there that we went there for, but we knew what we were going there for. And that's why it worked out. So that's what you got to do. You got to just be prepared and say, this is a disclaimer. This is exactly what we're looking for. Just know what you want. But that's what you would say, you know, I don't know. I think so. I think that's exactly what you would say. I'm going there to use this equipment, but have somebody that knows the equipment. And that's, if you don't, then you're just
Right.
kind of wasting your money.
You should even like maybe plan, like talk to your engineer, have these conversations, be aware and like ready to do this when you're going in.
Yeah.
So there's no question. It's just a smooth session. You're going in with a purpose, and you know.
Yeah, like know what's there beforehand.
also
Ask the
part of-
equipment, and then
it's
make
part
sure
of
the person that's going
knowing-
in there with you knows that equipment, and that's how you'll know.
it's
Ask the questions. You'll never
Part
know.
of learning yourself as an artist too, like knowing your sound to that level where you know you want to run this compression and this on this guitar tone or this guitar amp or guitar cab, you know. So a lot of factors involved, but you know, you watch all these tutorials and videos of some of the greats doing it and see what they use, and you try this and maybe say this will sound good with another compressor in there or something.
Zach, what about just like in the aspect of recording drums? Like, let's say you come in and you have
Yeah.
your mix already digitally done,
Yeah.
and you can run your stuff through this as well, the chain and everything, and you know somebody that they know what they're doing. What's the benefit of just recording drums now with this equipment live? Like,
Just recording drums?
yeah, like what we're doing, why we went back and recorded.
Well,
know,
for the
to
reasons
answer
I
that
was
aspect
saying,
of
I
it.
mean, there's a slightly better capture. We're running through all Neve pre's.
Direct, like right away.
So on the previous setup, I ran 4 Neve pre's, 4 Rupert Neve design pre's, which are a little different than the Neve 1073 pre's. Different companies. This is Neve, AMS Neve versus RND, Rupert Neve Designs on the bottom. Both Rupert Neve's designs, but you know, those are the classic 1073 pre's. The difference there with that, if I'm running that yellow button that's engaged, the negative 25 decibels, it gets a little more color out of the pre's. Kind of sets itself up to be fed into this gear really nicely with the gain staging I was talking about. It just,
But the 30,000 foot view
yeah,
literally is That was crazy what he explained, but you have to find your own, you know, a pattern as well and what you want to do in your patching and everything he was saying, except just streamline it if you don't know to find somebody like him that can help you with that. And that's how you do that. And it comes back to that. It's like, well, how am I ever going to do this? How am I ever going to get access to this equipment? You know?
Well, you can access it.
Right,
and
you can. You just got to have somebody that knows it. That's really what it comes down to.
Honestly,
which is great.
now that I am like more hands-on familiar with this stuff, it's like if I didn't have access to it and I know I needed to achieve a certain result, I would in a second, you know, rent out a space and do it because I know what's possible.
Which is exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. But it's, you know, it's a long journey. It's a long journey from start to finish, you know, regardless. And the whole thing is really that along the way, because there's so many parts of the process, there's a lot of points of failure is what I would like to refer to it as. Points of failure, areas where things can go, where the signal can get weakened, basically.
Right.
And so it's learning how to navigate your way around it, or maybe you want to purposely weaken the signal and create some sort of effect or whatever it is.
Why would you wanna do that?
Depends on the
It's
context.
just an effect thing.
Yeah, depends on what
You purposely
what mix
crank
or-
the prehair to distort it. It's
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
it's an
Like
effect.
lab rat cat?
Well, like
Yeah,
essentially,
whatever.
like if
Like,
I want, if
maybe
you
you want to record like some, you know, some Brooklyn shoegaze hipster band or something,
Right.
and they want that lower quality, but you can like
okay.
distort it and make it sound distorted, but still have like a really
a
clean
lot
mix.
of people that have been commenting on these videos say like digital cannot replicate the saturation and the color of you purposely
That's a
cranking
that's a
it
good
and distorting it. That's
analogy.
and-
or adjective.
and also because if I try to crank it and you get a nice distortion with you hitting their toms over here, that will have a certain analog circuitry character to that sound. If I do that same thing on the digital front, it just clips and it's just unusable.
right.
That's really it. Like
absorbs it better, too.
that's like throughout this whole video series, I've been more talking about like the benefits of being an all digital front. Zaki's been talking about an all analog front. One thing that I will absolutely concede on where digital will fail is doing that. There is a certain saturation with analog that digital will never be able to replicate. And that's a huge reason why a lot of rock bands, especially a lot of bands in the 70s, had the distortion on the kick, snare, their toms blended in nicely to have that analog sound.
Definitely.
So I really enjoyed this conversation with you guys, but I think I'm chomping at the bit here. I want to hear the difference between your old mix and the new and improved one with the analog.
Okay, here's it.
All right, this is a before. All right, that sounds good. All right, that was his before. It already sounds great.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna listen to that same song around the same length, except what you're about to hear is all analog mix, pre-master, all analog mix,
So this has no master on it.
no mastering, just all analog mix using this stuff here.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear the difference in the guitars immediately. Yeah, the clarity in that chorus.
Yeah, dude.
Turn it up a little bit. No master.
Yeah, dude. Instantly, the vocals sound way more wide. I don't know if you mixed that differently, but like
I didn't.
the vocals just sound like there's way more parts like panned. Like
That's what I was
it sounds
saying.
more wide. The guitars sound clearer.
In the context of something like Maximus, where there is so many stacks of vocals and vocal layers going on in the chorus, with between screams and cleans and distorted guitars and you know, you add 1176s and plug-in versions of things. It was like there was a little too much like high, mid, like some sort of like harsh, nasally annoyingness in there. Like I couldn't even put a finger on it. But you know, over here it's like there's so much more depth to it. Like it's like that headroom kind of to allow for that separation to happen and just more clarity between everything. This is all the same amount of layers as the previous mix, mixed on the same, you know, basically everything was processed in here. We did all the guitars in here. I retracked the drums. That's a big thing. You know, into different pre's, mixed them with all the analog gear in here, processed all the vocals in here, and then brought everything back to my other setup in the other room, and then essentially just ran some of the effects and automations I had in the sessions, and you know, basically organized and like had the EP. You know, also did the Bus Plus processing. Since I have one in there, I just did the Bus Plus in there. And yeah, I mean, that was prior to the master. You know, we're also having it mastered by Zach Kornhauser, who I worked with previously. He did the 40 Below Summer record, so just shout out, you know. And he's going to be tweaking the master on this with a little adjustment, and I'm sure it's going to sound great, you know.
Yeah, that is a pretty eye-opening difference.
It is, but that's like taking every part of the signal chain and eliminating that little bit of signal loss on every time you put a plug-in on. You know, like it adds up is the whole, you know. So when you listen to two different end results where it was entirely digital versus entirely analog, there's this. It's that much more of a difference. You know, like the difference is amplified, I guess.
So we're basically doing like a sort of like a, you know how boxers have tail the tapes here? So this is going to be setting up for, I think, the final part of this analog versus digital series here. So Zaki here is basically in the re-recording process of, remixing process of some of his newer songs on an upcoming album.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is Zaki is going to mix the raw stems entirely in analog. We're going to see how that sounds. And then I am going to take those raw stems and mix them entirely in the box on my digital setup. And we're going to have a final comparison with pros and cons of each. And I doubt the analog's going to have a lot of cons, if I'm being honest. But we'll make a fair pros and cons list.
Yeah.
And have the final conversation, at least in this series, about analog versus digital. So look forward to that. And maybe, possibly, we may let one of these songs slip up for a mixing contest. Maybe, possibly, mixing contest number 2.
Mixing contest.
That's
we'll
what we
make it a
call
lot
a tease.
more involved. No, a lot more involved composition this time. Let's put it
Yes.
that way.
2026 is already starting to set up to be really cool.
Yeah,
We're going to have a couple cool projects left to do with this. So, yeah, can't wait to hear that, dude. So we'll look
Absolutely.
forward to that. And hope you guys enjoyed the video, the talk, the conversation. He is Zaki Ali. He is Greg Telfayon. Both their socials are in the description. Follow them and catch you in the next one. Bye.